In 2007, two broke designers in San Francisco were about to miss rent. They had no hotel, no investors, no real company, just an apartment, a few air mattresses, and one strange question. Would a stranger pay to sleep on their floor? Most people would have said no. It sounded uncomfortable. It sounded unsafe. It sounded like the kind of idea people laugh at before they ignore it. But then three guests said yes. They walked into a small apartment in San Francisco, slept on air mattresses, ate breakfast in the morning, and paid for the experience. That tiny experiment became the beginning of Airbnb, a company that would one day help millions of people sleep in homes, apartments, cabins, rooms, and places that were never supposed to compete with hotels. But before Airbnb became obvious, it looked ridiculous. And before it became a billion-dollar empire, it was just 3 air mattresses on the floor. Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia were not famous founders. They were not Silicon Valley legends. They were designers trying to survive in one of the most expensive cities in America. They had moved to San Francisco with ambition, but ambition does not pay rent. The bills kept coming. The apartment was expensive, and their bank accounts were running low. Later, Nathan Blecharczyk joined them as the technical co-founder. Now they had design, code, and ambition. But they still did not have a real business. No traction, no clear market, no proof that people wanted what they were building. And that is the part most success stories skip. At the beginning, Airbnb was not a genius idea waiting to explode. It was 3 founders surrounded by doubt, trying to turn empty space into survival money. They were not thinking about changing travel. They were thinking about staying alive long enough to try again. Then San Francisco gave them a strange opening. A major design conference was coming to the city. Hotels were full. Visitors needed a place to stay. And Brian and Joe looked at their apartment differently. The floor was not just empty floor space anymore. It was inventory. They bought air mattresses. They created a simple website. And they called the idea Air Bed and Breakfast. The promise was simple. Sleep on an air mattress. Get breakfast in the morning. Meet local hosts. Pay less than a hotel. It was not polished. It was not scalable. It was not something a normal person would look at and say, "This will change the world." But it solved a real problem at the exact right moment. And then the first guests arrived. 3 people trusted them enough to sleep in their apartment. That was the first signal. Small, strange, and easy to dismiss. But real. Then came the darkest part. The company was running out of money. The founders were in debt. The website had almost no traffic. And the idea still sounded too weird for most investors. So they did something that made almost no sense. They started selling cereal. During the 2008 election, they created limited edition cereal boxes called Obama O's and Cap'n McCain S. They bought cheap cereal. They designed political collector boxes. They folded them by hand. They glued them shut in their kitchen. And they sold them for $40 a box. It was absurd. A startup about renting air mattresses was now trying to survive by selling breakfast cereal. But that absurd stunt kept them alive. It got attention. It made money. And more importantly, it showed something investors had missed. These founders would not die. They were creative. They were desperate. And they were willing to do whatever it took to keep the company alive. When they later interviewed for Y Combinator, the cereal story became part of their proof. Not proof that Airbnb was already huge. Proof that the founders were relentless. Then came the darkest part. The company was running out of money. The founders were in debt. The website had almost no traffic. And the idea still sounded too weird for most investors. So they did something that made almost no sense. They started selling cereal. During the 2008 election, They created limited edition cereal boxes called Obama O's and Cap'n McCain S. They bought cheap cereal. They designed political collector boxes. They folded them by hand. They glued them shut in their kitchen. And they sold them for $40 a box. It was absurd. A startup about renting Air Mattresses was now trying to survive by selling breakfast cereal. But that absurd stunt kept them alive. It got attention. It made money. And more importantly, it showed something investors had missed. These founders would not die. They were creative. They were desperate. And they were willing to do whatever it took to keep the company alive. When they later interviewed for Y Combinator, the cereal story became part of their proof. Not proof that Airbnb was already huge. Proof that the founders were relentless. Y Combinator gave them another chance. But money alone did not fix the business. Airbnb still needed trust. It needed better listings. It needed people to understand why staying in a stranger's home could actually be valuable. So the founders stopped thinking like a normal tech company. They went directly to their users. In New York, they met hosts in person. They looked at the listings. They noticed the photos were bad. Dark rooms, messy angles, no emotional appeal. So they helped take better pictures. They improved how the homes looked online. They talked to hosts. They studied guests. They did manual work that no big company would brag about. But that work changed everything. Better photos made listings feel safer. Better listings created more bookings. More bookings gave hosts confidence. And slowly, the trust problem started to shrink. The company was not growing because of one magic feature. It was growing because the founders kept removing friction, one uncomfortable problem at a time. Over time, Airbnb stopped being just a strange alternative to hotels. It became a new way to travel. For guests, it offered something different. A cheaper stay, a local neighborhood, a home instead of a hotel room. For hosts, it created a new source of income from space they already had. A spare room, an empty apartment, a vacation home, a couch, a floor. The idea expanded beyond Air Mattresses. Rooms became apartments. Apartments became entire homes. Entire homes became a global marketplace. And in 2009, Airbed and Breakfast officially became Airbnb. The name got smaller, but the vision got much bigger. What once sounded unsafe and awkward started to feel normal. Then practical, then obvious. And that is how powerful ideas often work. They do not arrive looking perfect. They arrive looking strange. Today, Airbnb is one of the most recognized travel companies in the world. But the most important part of the story is not the size of the company. It is the beginning. Because Airbnb did not start with a billion-dollar plan. It started with rent pressure, a sold-out conference, a few Air Mattresses, and 3 founders willing to keep going when almost everyone thought the idea was ridiculous. That is the lesson. A simple idea can look stupid before it looks smart. It can look too small before it becomes massive. It can look uncomfortable before the world understands the value. Most people wait for an idea to feel safe. But by the time an idea feels safe, someone else may already be building it. Airbnb began because 3 founders looked at empty floor space and saw opportunity. Not a perfect opportunity, not an obvious opportunity, but enough to start. And sometimes that is all a great idea needs. A real problem, a strange solution, and people stubborn enough to make the world believe it.